So here's my predicament. I've made a connection here between rib 10 and 9, and now I have to do the same thing between 9 and 8. Now the problem is, to do that, what I did was I created a face at the end here. Let me show you what I had there for a second. So I had this, and I just said mesh fill hole. And that was back here. And I extruded that face, got it all the way up to here. Then I deleted the face. Okay, so now I have an open face. Now what I want to do is connect this with this. And you can see they're two separate objects right now. So one thing I did was I realized, okay, I have these edges here. So when I looked at the rib up here, I realized I didn't have an edge there. The edge pattern there didn't match. If I hold shift, you can see the two. So I wanted to make sure I had a similar, in other words, I have 3 edges, 4 edges if you will here, 3 faces. I wanted to have 3 faces to correspond on all sides. Okay, so one way I did that is I select an edge, and when I was trying to select an edge, it was really difficult, but I finally got it. Then I used mesh tool, and I said slide edge. So what that lets me do, I use the middle mouse and I can move that edge. And see, I'm not changing the shape of the rib. I'm just moving the edge to get it more in line with what I want. One possible way of doing this is to go under your shading and say wireframe on shaded. And that way you can see as you're working, what you're trying to approximate really. And this is not going to be perfect until you join it. But the problem now is, how do I join it? So if I take this object and I say display, or let's just do it this way. Let's take the object and go into the attribute editor. Okay. And I want to make sure I'm seeing the shapes. This is rib 8 shape. And if I look there in that collection of attributes, one thing is called the mesh component display. And that has information at its bottom about normals, and it's saying it should display the normals, and their size should be 4, which is pretty large, but I don't see any normals. So what I'm curious about is if I go inside that rib, if I literally pan the camera in there, am I going to see the normals there? Maybe. There they are. See, when I'm inside, see how the normals are facing those lines there, that line. It's hard because we're inside. We'll see it better in a second, but that line represents a direction perpendicular to the surface, and the way the surface is facing according to the software is now this way, inside, interior. This is one of the reasons I was having a hard time picking the faces and picking the edges. So the problem is, if I select this guy, which is a combination of a loft, that's actually 9 and 10 now. And if I go and find their mesh component display, and I look again, display normals, you see their normals are facing out. And so the normals in these two objects are facing in the opposite directions. And that's going to make it difficult. What you're going to find is at some point later on, if you try to append these surfaces and in the process they twist, the pink appended surface that is generated between the two edges is twisted, then it's generally the problem is that the normals of the two objects, or the two models or surfaces you're trying to append, aren't facing in the same direction. So I found that out, and now I'm going backwards to say, oh, I better correct that. So I'm going to take this rib 8 and I'm going to go under UV and I'm going to say, I'm going to go into mesh display and I'm going to say reverse, And now the normals are facing outward, just like the one below. So see, the normals are now facing all in the same direction. And that will allow me to do the append to polygon, which I'll do next.